And we're on. Okay, I am Colleen Vanoy, and I'm here representing the new conservative movement, here with Damian Kidd, who is running for the 3rd Congressional District in Utah against incumbent Jason Chaffetz.
Yes.
So we are very excited to see some changes as the new conservative movement. So we will not do any more introductions or anything. I encourage you to check out Damian's website, www.damianwkid.com.
And if you want to, there's an easier Kid for Congress. It will take you to the same place. So
Great.
2 Ds, kidforcongress.com.
Fabulous. So look there, there's interviews and things, but we're going to just go right into the questions. All right, so why are you a conservative?
Okay. So I thought before I get into the why, I know that all of your Facebook followers probably know this really well. But for those who don't understand the conservative movement and what it means to be a conservative, I thought I'd just kind of describe, really in my mind, what a conservative is. And so I would start with the fact that if you meet a conservative, you will find that that conservative is very optimistic about people.
Yeah.
Very excited about people and the individual worth of every person.
Yes.
One of my favorite YouTube videos that I watch and I show my kids, at least once a year, is Martin Luther King's street sweeper speech. If you've never seen this, please take a few minutes and go and watch it. It's Martin Luther King's street sweeper. You type that into YouTube. And basically what he talks about is it doesn't matter what your lot is in life. Go be the best that you can possibly be, whether it be that you're a street sweeper or whatever your lot in life. Go do your best. And so for conservatives, we believe in the worth of every individual. And every individual has this opportunity to go out and do whatever it is that they feel like is great in their life. And so I like that about conservatives. And it's so funny because you have other people out there that are not conservatives that look at us and for some reason they don't see that. And I think that's one of the things that we have to do a better job with, is to help portray what our belief is in every human being. And so we focus on the individual as conservatives. And right behind us we've got the Declaration of Independence. And you can just go to this document to really determine what it is to be a conservative. And so, you start with that we are all created equal. And this also can be misconstrued very easily by people who don't have a firm grasp of what conservatism is. Being created equal doesn't mean that we all have an equal outcome in life, that we all should have an equal income, that we all should have the same everything. That is not what being created equal means. To a conservative, what being created equal means is that when we are born, we do not have dominion over one another.
Right.
We do not have authority over one another, especially as adults. Obviously as children, but as adults, we're created equal. We don't have dominion over one another. So, but what really, in the context of what we're talking about, is what is the role of government? Yeah. We've got this government and we've got this group of individuals in a society. What is the relationship between the government and the individual? And again, we look back at the Declaration of Independence, and we know that the role of government is basically to preserve and protect basic rights that we all have. And so what rights are we talking about? Again, you look at the founders, and they're talking about, and even in the Declaration of Independence, it describes 3 of what I would consider the 5 basic rights. We've got life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. What is not in there is property, and also sort of the religious liberty. And so I would consider those to be the 5 basic rights. And I think where people kind of get derailed a little bit is that, and this is a very critical distinction to a conservative, these fundamental basic rights are not created by government. They are not defined or described by government. These exist independent of government. These are our natural rights. And if you talk to your group, and I believe the same thing, these are God-given rights. Thomas Jefferson, in I think it was 1816, wrote a letter to somebody, I can't remember who, and he said, God who gave us life gave us liberty. And so this is what we're talking about, these rights that exist outside of government. And like I said, 5 basic ones: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, property, and religious religious liberty. And so the role of government is not to create those rights, is not to define those rights. The role of government is to preserve those rights for all individuals. That should be the basic function of the relationship between government and individual. So that is a conservative. You'll know a conservative when they start talking about the Declaration of Independence. They talk a lot about the Constitution. They talk about all the writings of our founders. You will see that a lover of conservatism is a lover of the founding of our country. And all men are created equal, and these basic rights, that's the soul of what our country was founded upon.
Right.
This is a conservative. And so what we really believe, the end of all that, basically what these basic liberties and all men created equal produce is what should be limited government, low taxes, basically so that every individual can go out and be the best that they can be, pursue their own happiness, unencumbered by the government and unencumbered by other people. That's the basic purpose of our government. That's the role between government and individual. Why am I a conservative? That was your original question. This is maybe a little bit harder to describe because I go back, my first memory, and I talk about this all the time, especially now that I'm running for Congress in the 3rd District. One of my first memories, I think maybe my first memory, is my parents let me stay up and watch the Ronald Reagan election returns come through. I think it was 1984. So I was 8 years old. We had this big, crappy, heavy TV, a little tiny screen, but the TV itself was huge. And I remember my parents let me stay up and watch these election returns come in, and the news is talking about both candidates, and I'm watching Ronald Reagan, and I'm just, for whatever reason, just mesmerized with this individual, and always have been. And so, but way back, I don't know if it was a school teacher, if it was my parents, I don't know who, but I've always had a love for our founders. I'm a religious person. I believe that our founders were divinely inspired to do what they did. And if these men were divinely inspired and they're talking about things like all men are created equal and basic rights, I gravitate towards that and always have. So from the earliest that I can remember, I loved our founders. I loved the founding of our country. And so I don't know if I should thank a school teacher or a group of school teachers or my parent. I don't know who it was. Maybe it was just sitting in class and maybe reading a textbook or something like that. So I've always gravitated to our founders. I don't have sports heroes. I mean, I'm not an athlete. I do a little bit of long distance running, but I don't have sports heroes. I don't care about movie stars. My heroes are Adams, Jefferson, James Madison, Hamilton. Yes, Hamilton. If you haven't read Hamilton, go and read Cherneau's biography. He's not the scoundrel that everybody seems to make him out to be today. I love Hamilton. But my favorite's George Washington. I did a town hall a couple of weeks ago in Provo. My wife didn't know I was going to do this, but when I'm in Congress, one of the things I'd like her to do is to go out and drum up some private donations because I think John Adams deserves a national monument in Washington, D.C. He didn't get his due. I think he deserves his due. And it's funny because he did a ton, and if you read some of his writings, he predicted that Jefferson would get all the glory. Even though, we could go on for hours about John Adams, but I love John Adams, but,
The heart.
Yeah, so anyway, George Washington, my favorite. One last thing about why I'm a conservative, and maybe this has something to do with it as well. My dad was a small business owner. He started his business with just himself, and at the peak of his business, when he sold it, he had about 40 to 50 employees. And as I was growing up, my dad sort of involved me in everything he was doing with his business. And what I personally observed was that the more government interfered with his business, the worse his business did, and vice versa. So I think that probably has a lot also to do with why I'm a conservative.
Yeah, the small government.
Yes, exactly. And the taxes, taxes have a big, I love Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Another thing for anybody who's watching this on Facebook, go watch the street sweeper speech on YouTube. And although it will take you a lot longer than watching the street sweeper speech, go read Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. And don't read the abridged, please. I know the unabridged is like 1,200. I did the audiobook, so I don't know how. It's like 1,200 pages. But
Take a couple weeks.
Go read that. You have to. Obviously, we don't agree with everything, but it's a great book.
That's good.
So,
Well, let's
anyway.
go on to the next question.
Yes.
Okay, so of the 13 principles of New American Leadership, our group supports which principle resonates with you and why?
I know it's number one. I didn't pick it because it's number one, but it is number one. Basically, that God gave us our basic rights, and that the purpose of government is to preserve those rights. And the reason I think
you talked about that already.
yeah, we already talked about it. I think all the other 12 principles either directly flow from that basic principle, or they support it.
Right.
And so it's like the abortion one, the right to life. That is a basic. That is one of those 5 basic freedoms that I believe that we all have independent of government. And yes, I know this is dismaying to half of America, I guess, but I do believe that baby that fetus is a life and is entitled to life. That is one of our 5 basic
The right
freedoms.
to life. Okay, great.
But number one.
Okay. Number 3. What are some of the root causes of the extreme partisanship that currently plagues Washington?
Yes. So this is probably, I love this question, because this is pretty much my whole campaign, my whole motivation for running. Basically what happened was I watched Congress over the last 15 or 20 years as a spectator. And it's like, it seems like a bunch of kids back there either goofing off or fighting. That's what I really perceive is going on back there. And the result is basically nobody's done anything meaningful on immigration. Our gross national debt has doubled since Jason Chaffetz took office. From 8 or 9 trillion, it's now, gross national debt is now 19 trillion. The worst thing you can do for immigration and for the gross national debt is nothing. And that's basically what our Congress has done back there, is nothing. And why? Because of all the partisanship and all the fighting and the divisiveness and the inflammatory comments. And so basically, this partisanship, where does it come from? And by the way, the reason why I want to go back there and be a congressman is because we need a new generation of statesmen. I was talking to a woman the other day who said she wishes that she could push a button and just kind of wash away everybody that's there and replace everybody, Republicans and Democrats. But we absolutely need a new generation of statesmen that are going to go back there, instead of being partisan, to put principle before politics, and to find solutions, to go back there and be solution oriented. But anyways, that's what I think we need.
Right.
But back towards what's causing it. So there's 5 things I think that are causing it. I'm going to roll through these as fast as I can because I know we're limited on time. 4 of them we can't do anything about and shouldn't, but the 5th one we can. So number 1 is social media. This is sorry, I know we're on Facebook right now. And we shouldn't do anything about this, but social media, I have found, is so polarizing. It is so very polarizing. It's this thing that we didn't have when we were younger, that you could go on and say whatever you really want to say, and you don't have any consequences. If people start fighting back, you just turn it off. So I think social media has been very polarizing. Number 2, false news. Usually the false news that comes out is very extreme, and social media has helped to fan those flames. Yeah, we're not going to be able to solve that. Maybe we can create some laws, but as you may know from looking at my website, government governs best, which governs least. I think we have too many laws. Congress should go back there for 2 weeks, do their thing, and then come home. I don't understand why they're back there doing all that they're doing. Number 3 is the media. On the one hand, you've got Rush Limbaugh, you've got Sean Hannity, you've got some others. They're going to do what they're going to do, and we shouldn't change that. Where I believe in the First Amendment, and they should be able to say what they're going to say. And Rachel Maddow and others on the other side, and so we have these personalities that are on the opposite extremes. That's kind of helped to facilitate partisanship. And then number 4, my thought is that whenever you start as a country edging towards crisis, I think people start to move to the extremes, and that creates some partisanship.
Yeah, that's true.
2 crises that I'm talking about, and I discussed this a few minutes ago, are the gross national debt. That's my biggest worry. What are we doing? 19 trillion. Does anybody know who we even owe this money to? Is it, you hear China? I don't know who it is. We're in trouble. If this gets worse and it becomes a bigger part of our GDP, we are in huge trouble. Yeah. And then the immigration issue. We could go on for a couple of hours on immigration. issue, but we have to solve it. Gross national debt and the immigration issues specifically are not going to be solved by Republicans alone, and they're not going to be solved by Democrats alone. It's going to have to be a bipartisan solution. It has to be. So those four things we're not going to do anything about, unfortunately. Well, fortunately, I mean, we can't silence the media. We shouldn't, all those things. Facebook, social media, not doing anything about it. Number 5 is the actual people that we are sending back to Washington. We have to change.
Chaffetz was a Tea Party.
Yes. Chaffetz, okay, if you watch the Washington Post, Chaffetz, and I know it's a relatively left-leaning paper, but they call Jason Chaffetz, our own Jason Chaffetz, the poster child for divisiveness. This is a man who he's very divisive, he's very inflammatory. We saw the iPhone comment a couple of weeks ago. Unfortunately, that took away from the real conversation we should be having about real healthcare reform.
What time are we
Yeah.
at? We should probably put
9:45. No questions yet.
no questions yet?
Okay.
And but it's been 10 minutes and there's no questions posted. Okay.
We'll just keep rolling.
Keep going. Yeah.
Okay, so back to the partisanship. So we have to adapt. We have to start sending people back to Washington that have a backbone, that are going to stand up and say, I understand the party that I'm coming from, but I'm going to put principle before party. I'm going to put principle before politics. And I'm going back with an idea that I want to create solutions.
Right.
Not to further my career in office, but to create solutions to these problems. We should be, and the health care bill that the Republicans just proposed, I would suspect that most of your group was not a fan of that health care bill that was proposed. Right. As I saw this thing happening, and I've got the bills sitting up in my office, and I've got through it, it is basically not what we sent people back there to do.
They've had a long time.
They've had enough time. And can I just say that Obamacare is funded for the next 2 years. So take your time and get this thing right. But there is no bipartisanship back there right now with this health care bill.
Yeah.
And you look at this thing, and even from a conservative perspective, they're not employing free market reforms. It's ridiculous. I can't even believe they tried. And thank goodness that there were some conservatives back there that put a stop to it. But I mean, and it's kind of funny because there's a lot of Democrats and liberals that have reached out to me in frustration and anger over this bill. And the thing is, this is the best bill they could have hoped for. It was basically just Obamacare, sort of just Obamacare light, I think is what Rand Paul called it. And I guess I would probably agree with that statement. So it was something it was the best that they're going to get, the Democrats. And so, but anyway, it sounds like it's dead in the water. It's a good thing, because this thing is crippling our country.
Okay, let's move right to
Yes.
what are 3 most effective changes that you see that we can make to the healthcare system?
Okay, so first of all, we've got to stop the bleeding. We've got to repeal it. And this is going to be more than 3, but I'll try to roll through them.
Yeah.
So I think the first big category of things is basically to employ free market reforms. We got to be able to have health insurance carriers be able to sell across state lines. We have to increase competition. There are certain states where, it's my understanding, there's only 1, maybe 2 companies that are selling policies. That's not good. You want to create competition. There's a reason. I'll bring up the iPhone again. There's a reason why my iPhone hasn't really changed in price. I'm a huge Apple fanboy. I don't like the politics, but I like the products. And I buy the iPhone and iPad, and prices don't really ever seem to change over time because of competition. Because they have Samsung out there and a variety of other things. Competition is good because it promotes and generates new technology, while at the same time, we don't pay as much for an Apple computer now as we did. Unless you buy the biggest one. Right. Relatively speaking, the prices have come down. So why is healthcare going up?
Right.
So we got to promote free market reforms, competition, things like that. So that's category number 1. Category number 2 is we have got to deal with the regulations. I think this is a big part of why you see health insurance premiums rising.
Doctors' offices have 1, 2 people just dealing with regulations,
Pushing papers
litigation.
around. Yeah.
Yes.
Pushing papers around. And we know that there is no, when they're just, paying billions of dollars every year just for complying with regulation, we know that no money is going towards this relationship between doctor and patient. It's the second big one is we have to reduce regulation. One of the ways, especially when our politicians in Washington, who knows what they're back there doing, goofing off or fighting.
I'm all for having them tell you, hey, have them stay here. Why not?
Sure. Well, I was listening to it.
That's a little extreme. But.
Yeah. Well, it's I don't know what your group thinks about Justin Amash from Michigan, but take a look at him. He's a congressman. He basically, I watched a town hall of his, and he said, we're back here 100 days out of the year. So that's another 265 days that our congressman should be back here meeting with people, talking to people. It doesn't look like it. It doesn't. And again, the longer you put between that first, what I'm doing right now is campaigning. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, can you just give me 1 second? Can we just pause there for 1 second?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, how are you different than Chaffetz? And I know this group is concerned, it's the Trump factor.
Yes.
How would you be different than Chaffetz in handling Trump? And, did I miss the other question?
Where do you stand on party over principle?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start with principle over party. You look at all my messages in the media, my town halls, everything about me is principle before politics, principle before party.
Okay.
You go back there, you take your principles with you, you don't leave them at the door, and that means sometimes you have to have a backbone and you stand up to party. It's amazing to me, one of the easiest ways to sort of describe what we're talking about here is whenever the president goes before a joint session of Congress. Whatever party the president's in, occasionally they'll say something that should be something the other party likes, but yet nobody stands up. This is a symbol of what I'm talking about. If the president says something that you don't like, don't stand up for it, and if he says something that you do, even if he's from the other party, have a backbone, stand up and clap and see, I like that. I like that free market idea that Obama may have proposed. I don't know if he did, he probably didn't, but if he had, I would have stand up and clapped. How am I different from Chaffetz? Let me just start with the easy, sort of fluffy stuff. Basically, in tone, I don't intend to go back there and be divisive and inflammatory like he is. Like I said, we've talked about, he's the poster child for divisiveness. In purpose, we differ for our reasons being back there. I think it's clear to anybody who's followed Jason Chaffetz is that his entire goal is to have a career in politics, to continue to climb up that ladder. I'm pretty confident he's talked about being governor in 2020. Who knows where it goes from there, but his purpose of being back there is basically for himself to advance his career in politics. Me, on the other hand, my goal is to go back there and find some solutions to these serious problems. We're in trouble.
Yeah.
Especially with the debt and with immigration, we're in big trouble.
Yeah.
My motive is to go back there and solve those problems and then get the heck out. I don't want to be back there. And so that we differ in purpose. And then again, the third thing that we differ on is in substance. I am principle before politics. He's just the opposite. Let me give you some examples of this. Very early on in Trump's presidency, when I first decided to do this back in February, you can see both in media and in my Facebook that I wanted Chaffetz to have some basic common sense oversight over Donald Trump. I have said that, I have put it in writing, I believe it has to happen. He'll tell you that he looked into the post office that Trump turned into a hotel. Ooh, big look. I think that our government, whether it's Chaffetz or the House Intelligence Committee, who's ever responsible for it, needs to look into what influence the Soviet Union had on our elections. As a conservative, as a patriot, as somebody who loves my country, we have to maintain the fidelity of our elections.
So
we have to.
Would you support an independent commission to be
Absolutely, absolutely. Why not?
Yeah.
We have to maintain. Yeah, let's find out. We have to maintain the fidelity of our elections. Is there anything more important to a republic? So there you go. Absolutely.
Huge concern of our founders.
Yes, yes. Emoluments clause, for example. Of course, we are concerned about foreign influence in our government. Absolutely, it's a big issue.
What's your opinion on the Evan McMullen campaign?
The Evan McMullen campaign. Are we talking about his statement from last week that he might consider? Or are we talking about the presidential campaign?
Presidential campaign, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've talked a lot with my wife and others about this. Do I like the two-party system? No, we have it. It's there. And one of the things, if you haven't gone and done this, anybody who's watching, go back and read George Washington's farewell address. He spends a decent amount of time in his farewell address talking about the mischiefs and the problems with partisanship. I was going to mention this back before when we were talking about partisanship, but I think one of the causes of partisanship is that we have this two-party system and everybody feels like they've got to filter out to one of the other parties, and then you end up with these extremes.
Well, it's the lesser of two evils, but we still get evil. That's big concern
Right,
of our
right. As far as his presidency, I'm glad he did it. I believe in his 13 principles, of course. My mother-in-law and father-in-law were Evan McMullen voters. And so, yes, yeah. And so I appreciate absolutely the message that he's out talking about, for sure. When I looked, when I first read his 13 principles, I thought, holy cow, this sounds like me. And so that I do very much appreciate about Evan McMullen, getting those principles out there and having people start talking about those once again. They're critical.
Okay. Questions?
No more.
No more questions? Okay, let me ask one that I have from earlier. Okay. How would you work to restore balance of powers, returning the power to the states?
Yeah.
Big.
Yes. So balance of powers, this is one of those things that our founders believed in that would help, because what we're worried about is you and I infringing on our liberties against one another, but we're also worried about the government overreaching and infringing on our liberties. One of the ways that they tried to check that, to address it, is by this balance of powers. We got basically the three branches of government, but we also you have the 10th Amendment that is supposed to, whatever the federal government doesn't do, which it does way too much.
Right. It's been overblown.
It's insane. We got to start ratcheting that back and get it to the states. One example is, and of course I focus most of my message on Congress and the federal government because that's where I want to be.
Right.
That's where I want to try to get things back to the states. But specifically in regards to the three branches of government, I know your question was about the states, but I think it's a really good example of where we've gone wrong, are all these executive orders. And Bears Ears is a big one that we're talking about here in Utah. We're allowing way too many executive orders. I think that this takes away those powers from Congress to be able to debate, to have constructive debate and discussion about the best thing to do for our country. And instead we put it in the hands of the executive branch to just go and sort of willy-nilly do what they're going to do. Both parties have abused the executive order situation. I think that's most relevant right now, but absolutely, we talked about health care. The more we can get to the states, the better. Because the 10th Amendment, it's appropriate that happens anyway. But we all know the reason for the 10th Amendment, the reason why we'll want to put things back in the states is because they're more efficient, they're better equipped to handle what the needs are. Closer to the people. And have a better understanding of what the people within your given state really want. They're accountable to the people. The people may be different in California than they are here.
Very
So,
much. Okay, any other
One.
questions?
No questions.
No questions? Okay, just one last thing.
yes.
And this was a concern that was talked about was, are you satisfied with what Donald Trump has been doing? Maybe name one thing that you would express to him and say, this is not okay.
One thing that I don't think is okay, or one thing I do think is
Maybe
okay?
do one
Okay,
thing.
I'll do
Okay.
one of each.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's do that.
So I am a big supporter of our military. I think that this is one area that is the mandate of the federal government to help us preserve these basic rights.
Right.
We have to make sure that we don't have any foreign influence on our people and our government. We have to have the best and brightest military. That doesn't necessarily have to increase this budget. We can go and we can negotiate contracts and get the best equipment, the best technology, give our troops the best that they can that they deserve, And I like the fact that Donald Trump seems to desire to do that and to do it at a cost and make it be cost effective. I do appreciate that. I think one of the first things he did was negotiate contracts on our fighter planes. We've got a lot of fighter planes that are out of commission.
See, my husband would disagree.
Yeah.
He didn't negotiate it, but he did have influence.
He did. He was talking about it. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I don't like, this is an easy one. He has got to get off Twitter. He just, and maybe to kind of make this conversation a
Well,
little
some
bit.
of us would say, but then that's when we see the real.
We see the real Donald Trump. I think the problem is it contributes to all this partisanship and divisiveness. Whether the president was Evan McMullen, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, for the betterment of our country, I hope that they succeed. Because if they're a failure, I don't think that's good for our country. I think we need to constantly be vigilant about preserving our rights. I'll tell you, one thing that I was really disappointed with was that initial executive order on the travel ban. We in Utah specifically,
our group especially was very strongly against that.
we in Utah understand religious freedom, and we ended up here because of religious persecution. And I think we would have had a different discussion about this travel ban had Donald Trump not been so divisive about Muslims in his campaign. That if he was intending to do a travel ban,
the way he campaigned mattered.
Yep, absolutely. So there you go.
Okay. Well, we will close. This is Colleen Vanoy, representing the New Conservative Movement, and Damian Kidd, running for the 3rd Congressional seat against incumbent Jason Chaffetz. This is not an endorsement, but this is just an opportunity, and I really hope you take it, to get to know your candidates. It is our responsibility to elect good, honest, wise leaders so we can improve America. Yeah, would you have something? No? Okay. We will close.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was